Λοιπόν, καλησπέρα σε όλους. Καλώς ήρθατε πάλι σε άλλο ένα webinar που διοργανώνω για τους φίλους και συναδέλφους συμβούλους σταδιοδρομίας, να ανταλλάζουμε καλές πρακτικές, να μαθαίνουμε περισσότερο, να εξελισσόμαστε και το πιο σημαντικό, να γνωριζόμαστε και μεταξύ μας. Σήμερα εδώ μαζί έχω την Φρίντα ή Φρόσο Ζαψάλη από τη μακρινή Αυστραλία. Αν θυμάμαι καλά, Φρίντα, εκεί είναι απόγευμα τώρα,
7 το βράδυ.
7 το βράδυ. Έχει βραδιάσει, λοιπόν.
Ναι.
Έχει βραδιάσει στη μακρινή Αυστραλία και την ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ που είναι σήμερα μαζί μας. Και να σας πω και λίγα λόγια για την Φρίντα, ότι είναι πολύ έμπειρη σύμβουλος σταδιοδρομίας αλλά και εκπαιδευτικός σταδιοδρομίας, career educator, εκπαιδεύει δηλαδή και άλλους συμβούλους σταδιοδρομίας. Έχει εργαστεί σε διαφόρους ρόλους στον τομέα της τριτοβάθμιας. Μέσα σε αυτά είναι και η πρακτική άσκηση. Κάποιος έχει ανοιχτό το μικρόφωνο, έχει κάνει θόρυβο. Η Ελευθερία δεν πειράζει. Όχι, κάποιος άλλος είναι. Δεν μου κάνει παράσταση. Ωραία. Η Φρίντα λοιπόν έχει εργαστεί σε διαφόρους ρόλους, όπως στην πρακτική άσκηση, στο employer engagement, στην δέσμευση του εργοδότη, στη διδασκαλία σε προπτυχιακούς και μεταπτυχιακούς φοιτητές. Είναι συντονίστρια στο Design Your Career στο Πανεπιστήμιο RMIT, που είναι από τα καλύτερα πανεπιστήμια του κόσμου και στα καλύτερα της Αυστραλίας. Και τώρα κάνει και το διδακτορικό της σχετικά με το ρόλο των διεπιστημονικών εμπειριών της ομάδας της στην ταυτότητα καριέρας των φοιτητών, των ανθρωπιστικών και κοινωνικών επιστημών. Και έχει αντίστοιχα διαπιστευτήρια όπως και το μεταπτυχιακό δίπλωμα εκπαίδευσης στην επαγγελματική ανάπτυξη από το Πανεπιστήμιο του Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology. Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ, Φρίντα, και σε παραδίδω στο αγαπητό μας κοινό.
Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ, Δημήτρη, και ευχαριστώ σε εσάς που με ακούτε. Είναι μια μεγάλη τιμή να μιλήσω σε Έλληνες σύμβουλους σταδιοδρομίας. Με συγχωρείτε όμως ότι θα μιλήσω στα αγγλικά. Όσο θα ήθελα, πώς θα μ' άρεσε να μιλήσω τα ελληνικά, τα επαγγελματικά μου δεν είναι τόσο καλά να μιλάω στα ελληνικά. Let's begin. My presentation today is on developing client agency, which I believe is Antiprosopia, using two different theories or frameworks. One of them is planned happenstance theory, and the other one is a design thinking framework. And those two are quite similar, which we'll talk about in a moment. Before we start, I wanted to introduce where I'm from, and Dimitri mentioned I'm from Melbourne, RMIT. Οι γονείς μου είναι από τα Γρυβενά, στη Μακεδονία, και έρχομαι συχνά στην Ελλάδα, αγαπάω την Ελλάδα πάρα πολύ. Και όπως σου είχα πει, δουλεύω στο RMIT. Το RMIT Πανεπιστήμιο έχει περίπου 70.000 φοιτητές. Έχουμε βάση στη Μελβούρνη, αλλά έχουμε και στο Βιετνάμ και στην Ισπανία. Έχουμε ένα πανεπιστήμιο εκεί. Και περίπου 40% από τους φοιτητές είναι από άλλες χώρες. Είναι από international students που λέμε εδώ. Και we've got a diverse range of students in our university. Ήθελα να ξέρω, μερικοί από εσάς είπατε όπου είσαστε, αλλά στο chat θα ήθελα να ξέρω σε ποιο νομό είστε αυτή τη στιγμή. Ηράκλειο, εκεί, ωραία. Καστοριά, όμορφη Καστοριά. Καρδίτσα. Παντού βλέπω. Πολύ ωραία. Καλημέρα, Ρεμπέκα. Αττικής. Στιώτιδα, ωραία. Αθήνα. Πολύ ωραία. Τα διαβάζω και αισθάνομαι ότι είμαι στην Ελλάδα τώρα. Γι' αυτό ρωτήξα που είσαστε. Τι ωραία. Now, the agenda for today, what I'll be talking about, as I mentioned before, planned happenstance learning theory, design thinking as a practical framework. And then I will go through some activities that I use with my students. So as Dimitri mentioned before, I teach a class called Design Your Career. And we go through a process of how we can design a career. And we're looking at self-awareness, questioning assumptions, and how we can explore opportunities. I'm putting a quote here. It's very important because I think we focus, as career counsellors, we focus on different types of questions from our students. But I think one of the most important aspects of developing our students' career development is their agency, their antiprosopia. It's an important construct, and this is a quote from a thesis I recently read, because it is more durable and because it is more durable and relevant than career decidedness, given the main life and work transitions that emerging adults will eventually face. So you can be decided with your career, but you can be unhappy with your career. However, you can also be undecided with your career, but be happy. So I think agency is really important to instill in our clients, because they can take control over their lives and develop their confidence in making decisions in the future. So planned happenstance theory. Has anyone heard of John Crumboltz? Wahi?
No.
No. He's the psychologist. He recently passed away, but he developed the planned happenstance learning theory. Basically, he says that, and to create opportunities, we use these mindsets, these qualities: curiosity, piriere, epimony, velixia, ευελιξία, ανάληψη κινδύνου, αισιοδοξία. We use those qualities to create opportunities from unplanned events, and this happens to everyone. A lot of opportunities arise from things that weren't planned, and that's happenstance, and that includes opportunities for learning in creating a satisfying life. So trying to make these things happen, trying to be proactive, to not only find jobs, but find opportunities to learn, which eventually could help us find jobs. So being curious, it means exploring new learning opportunities, open to new opportunities. As an example, I contacted Dimitri. I was curious to find out how the career counselling industry works in Greece. So I contacted him. Persistence, keep on trying despite setbacks. I had a student who applied for a job at a major bank in Australia. She was unsuccessful. She got some feedback, but she kept on persisting. She worked on her feedback, and she eventually got a job at that bank. Flexibility, so understanding that sometimes we're not able to work in a certain job because we might not have the experience. So we might need to work at another company or another job to work on our experiences. We have a lot of international students and migrants that come to Australia, and a lot of them, I'm not sure if it's the same in Greece, they work for Uber. They drive Uber taxis, and these people have a lot of high qualifications, but they have to be flexible in working in a job that they might not like. Eventually, they will fall into a job that they're more, I suppose, that they're more suited to. There's risk-taking as well. Sometimes we take risks, even small risks, but things that we take action in situations you might find uncomfortable. So it might be calling up an employer or applying for a job that you think you want to do, but you think you're not qualified for. To some people, that's a risk, and risk-taking is good. And optimism as well, αισιοδοξία. The philosophy behind this theory is that, first of all, as career counsellors, we should look at ourselves as educators as well. So we're not just there to help people, but to educate them. We're not just there to provide them with information, but help them make their own decisions. So we work with our clients. We collaborate. It's another word of working with clients, collaboration with clients. Let them take action. We guide them with our questions, but let them take ownership of their decisions. And they need to we try to develop skills to manage change and uncertainty in careers and work. And I'm focusing on enhancing career agency, so some control over people's lives, which includes their self-efficacy and also an understanding of career dysfunctional beliefs. And career dysfunctional beliefs could be something like, I don't have much experience, which means I'm not going to find a good job. That's a dysfunctional belief. Now, how do we help our clients? First of all, when we provide our clients with career assessments, you might get them to do a personality test or an interest assessment like Holland. We try to have them understand about themselves. So it's not just showing clients what they're suited to, but also understanding where their strengths lie and where that can take them, where their weaknesses are, and how we can develop their weaknesses. So it's a learning process for them. We also try to help them overcome barriers to action. So we ask them questions to find out where they think that where there's no action, how they can create action. We ask them questions to understand their dysfunctional beliefs and try to get them to rethink these dysfunctional beliefs so they become more positive. We try to build on their past successes. So we'll find opportunities where they did very well in something and build on that. So what their strengths were in a different context and how they can bring that strength in another context. We try to also reframe on unplanned events as opportunities. So something that has happened, an example would be COVID, a huge pandemic, how we can use COVID as an example of creating opportunities. And I'll talk about that in a moment. Now, the word reframe, Dimitri, when I've translated it in Greek, it says anaplysiosi. Is that the same meaning in this context?
Πολύ σωστά.
It is, okay. I always thought it was a different context, but if it makes sense, it's good. And we also try to have our clients learn to take action. So not just create goals, because that's important, but give them an opportunity for them to take actions and work on those goals. And when they come back to see us, to see what kind of actions they've taken and what they've learned from those actions. Now I'm using design thinking as a practical model. So design thinking, a lot of the theory behind planned happenstance theory that I mentioned before works in design thinking, which you'll see in a moment. Now this is a bit different because design thinking traditionally is a framework used by engineers, by designers, and it is a human-centered approach. So using people who use a certain product or a service, we ask them to understand how they use that service or product in designing new products or improving on them. So for example, here, you can see the picture. A lot of companies work on many complex problems. And one complex problem here is how to make MRIs less frightening for children in hospital. And in this example, the person who actually designed MRIs visited the hospital here, and he found out that 80% of children, they use anesthetic on children to calm them down because it's very distressing for them to go into the MRI. It's scary. It makes sense. Everyone's scared, and most people will be scared going into an MRI. But for children, they have to have an anesthetic to calm them down. So the person who designed the MRI thought about, what can I do to make this, to change this? So he interviewed parents, he spoke with children, he spoke with educators, he spoke with people who work at children's museums. And in the end, he designed this experience for children to make it, I suppose, less frightening, perhaps even more exciting for them to go into this MRI. And the outcome was that the percentage of children going into being an anesthetic decreased dramatically. So it really helped parents and children manage their time in hospital. You're probably thinking, what does this have to do with careers? Well, design thinking can also be used in careers because we're the experts in our life. Well, clients are the experts of their own life, but we're also there to guide them because sometimes, obviously, people are anxious, depressed. They need someone to guide them in their agency, in their career decision making. So Stanford University, who work with the design thinking framework, have used this model in designing people's lives and career because career influences other things, your life, and your life influences your career. So it's all a holistic view of where we live. Another thing I wanted to mention is the design thinking framework that I'll talk about in a moment. A lot of the things that I'll be talking about, you probably do as career professionals. And it's probably, a lot of the things I'll be mentioning are common sense. And I guess a lot of things we do, but this is more of a framework so you can see end to end how this process works. Now, the problems that we see as career counsellors, some problems, the answers aren't obvious. Some problems have more than one solution. There's incomplete information. We don't know exactly client. They don't know. They might not have an awareness. Or there might be too much information. Sometimes having too much information makes our client work here. Empathize is the first part of the model, and empathize, sympathia, which is in Greek, meaning we try to understand ourselves. So empathize can work with empathizing other people, but here you're trying to empathize your client is empathizing themselves to understand who they are. So there are various activities that you probably use with your clients, strengths activities, what their motivations are, what their values are, what their skills are. And to work well in this process, you need to have an element of curiosity and to understand more about yourself and to take action in finding out more about yourself. Because I think when you do these sorts of activities, it gives you more insight about who you are, and also it gives you insight of what, for example, positions are suitable for you, what isn't suitable for you, etc. The next phase of design thinking framework is a define phase. And that really is the hardest part, I think, when I work with my students. That's the hardest part of understanding their problem, because sometimes they work on this problem, but they don't understand that there are some things they don't have control over. And when they don't have control over something, it really isn't the problem. You need to find something that you have control over. And once you know that, you have to understand what your motivations are. There might be also assumptions, things that you assume are correct, but they aren't correct. And then once we understand the problem, then we can start looking at solutions or brainstorm ideas of how we can work on our career problem. The ideate phase basically is brainstorming different solutions. And this is a creative way of finding solutions, but also it doesn't mean that all these solutions are acceptable. Some of them can be also, they might be unachievable, but having a lot of different brainstorming different types of solutions, it might get you to the right solution. The fourth phase, which I'll stop there, not up to prototype, is basically when we know what we can do, but we don't know. For example, it's called the prototype phase. So if your client is stuck and they think these are the sorts of jobs that look interesting to me, but I don't know whether these roles are acceptable for me, you prototype. And that is an inexpensive way. Also, it might be a quicker way of finding an answer rather than investing time applying for that role. So what I mean here is you try to understand what that role is without having gone into the role. So you might talk to people who have worked in that position. You might try to find experiences that are similar that will get you an understanding of the role before you invest time and energy in going to this job and thinking this job is not for me. You will never know 100% what it's like. a job you're trying to find, you're trying to get into, but it gives you some indication of whether this job is right for you or for them. So basically prototyping, the mindset here is a bias to action. And bias to action in Greek, I've got here, προκατάληψη και δράση. So you have to be δραστήριος. You have to go out and take some action to learn about these jobs, not just planning, but actually going in there and talking to people and having these experiences. You can see here lots of different things here, lots of different frameworks. I'm not trying to confuse you. All I want to say to you is that when you look at the 21st century skills, in particular that red in the rectangle, you can see all these qualities and competencies and skills that employers look for in people. And a lot of those qualities are really very similar to the qualities that you would need to work on your career, to develop your career. A lot of curiosity, critical thinking, understanding that sometimes we're assuming certain things about jobs, but we don't know because we haven't spoken to anyone. We need different perspectives. Being able to collaborate with people, meaning being able to work with people and getting an understanding of what a job means. Being persistent, keep on trying. You fail, you keep on trying. And so those skills are very important to finding a job, but also important to stay in a job as well. So all those frameworks we looked at before, I'm going to narrow them down to 3 areas here. So we'll be looking at tools to develop your client's career agency. Ελπίζω ότι οι δραστηριότητες που θα σας δώσω τώρα, θα σας δείξω μετά, να σας δώσουν ιδέες για τη δική σας πρακτική. So first of all, in the self-awareness section, we'll be looking at an example of strengths and skills. Under questioning assumptions and motivation, we'll be looking at how we can reframe your client's thinking. And under the exploration and engagement area, we'll be looking at how your clients can look at prototyping. So what kind of experiences they can take to develop, I suppose, to get a better understanding of how to move to the next level. Now here are some examples. When I used to work in the career office at RMIT, these are some examples of what students would some example problems they would bring to me. Sorry. I don't know what to do with my degree. To be successful, I need to work for a big bank. I need to work for PwC. How will I know working in marketing is the right job for me? Or the other one, and there's a lot of information there. Some students are working in a certain area, completing a certain degree, but they're not sure whether that degree is suitable for them. So here it says, I have an interest in child welfare. I'm currently enrolled in a psychology degree, and they're wondering whether they should choose a different degree, whether social work is better for them. So these are the types of problems design thinking can work well. Now, looking at self-awareness, we're going to look at character strengths and skills. And the first one here that I'll be looking at is character strengths, which when you translate that in Greek, it's dinamis tou χαρακτήρα μας. And we're using an inventory called the VIA, which is a Values in Action inventory of strengths. This is a very popular tool. It's used in many different countries. It's been tested. It has high validity, high reliability, and it classifies character strengths and virtues. So a student or a client will get a profile of their signature strengths, their top strengths. And theoretically, the person who developed this, Martin Seligman, he said that everyone has these strengths in different levels, but we focus on the 5 signature strengths. There's 24 here, but we focus on 5 of them. And I really hope you can, if you Google this inventory, it's free, you could use it online. There's 240 questions. It's a lot, but it's so useful. I actually used it on my son, and I was amazed at how accurate it was when he answered those questions. There's also a brief version. It's called the brief strengths test. I don't recommend using the brief one. I think the long one's more, I suppose, reliable. So if you work with clients, students in particular, or any client basically, but I've used it with students, it's a really good tool to use. And I'll give you an example of how I've used it. So before I do, actually, obviously just going through why it's important, why these strengths are important. They're really important to your identity, your tautotita. They relate to your happiness and satisfaction. They're more energized. You feel more energized when you use your strengths, and they're more natural to express because they're part of you. They're authentic. It captures your uniqueness and authenticity. It's quite powerful to know what your strengths are, and this is why we use it with our students. And these are all of the strengths. I've got them in Greek in brackets too. Now, this slide I've worked with a school in Greece, a high school in Greece, in Δευτέρα Γυμνασίου, στα Τρίκαλα. My sister works as είναι δασκάλα, καθηγήτρια Αγγλικών, και κάναμε αυτή την πράξη με τα παιδιά της. In her English class, actually, not any Greek class. It was an English class where we had students identify, first of all, they were given the test to do, a brief version of the test, not the long one. We asked them to explain which character strengths offer them comfort when they felt lonely or isolated. And also, we wanted to find out how they felt using their character strengths. So we did more than this, but this is one of the slides. And we also then got them to think about significant people in their lives. Think about a family person or a friend or a person you admire, even someone who they don't know personally, but someone a role model. We wanted them to identify the strength that person holds, and we wanted them to explain how they show this strength. So we did this as a way to build on their vocabulary. We wanted them, and also to have positive language. Ήθελαμε να έχουν θετική γλώσσα και λεξιλόγιο για να περιγράψουν τον εαυτό τους. And I think it's very empowering. It's wonderful for them because they get more confident, and they think about the strengths that they use in different contexts, not just school. We don't want them to focus just school, in their hobbies, with their family, how they interact with the other children. I think it's important for them to have that confidence at an early age. And I was really impressed. I have to say, I was so impressed. These students spoke to me in English, their second language. And I have to say, a lot of them spoke much better than my students at a university level. In that, what I mean by that is they were able to express themselves and give examples of how their strengths were shown. So that was a very positive experience. So if anyone works at a high school in Greece, I'd be happy to work with you to use this VIA, this assessment for your students. Another example I use, this is for my university students, is I have them we do this as a way for them to understand that they use their strengths in different contexts. So a lot of people say, I'm not really good at anything. They're very negative about themselves. But once you get them talking about their hobbies or things something that's interesting to them, then we find out what strengths do they use in their hobbies, what strengths they use with their family, for example. And then they get that confidence. So we get them to look at strengths at work, in their studies, in their extracurricular activities. And then we get them to provide an example of how they could use their strengths in a different context. So if you're someone who loves creativity and you might be very creative at home, how can you use your creativity in your schoolwork? How can you use your creativity in your hobby, for example? I had a student recently, in their assignment, they talked about their character strength, and it was zest. And I think zest, I have to go back here, in Greek, zesi. zesty. Their character strength in their assignment, they talked about how in their work they worked at an accounting office, and they said that they realized that they actually had a lot of zest in their work because they would bring energy into their work. They were really excited about their work, and they didn't realize that that was a strength that they held until we did this activity. Another activity I use with my students, and this one is basically, it's working in pairs with 2 students together. We get them to share stories of an experience, and then we get the other person to identify their strength or their skill and explain to the student, I can hear that it looks like you have good communication skills. It seems like you have really good problem-solving skills. So we get them to empathize with another student, and then that makes them aware, or we hope it does, of how they can talk about their own skills and strengths. So it's usually easier to provide positive feedback about someone else than yourself, mostly, not always. And that's why we try to get them to think about someone else first, and then they talk about themselves afterwards. The next part of that 3 model that I've got there is questioning assumptions and motivations. And I've got some examples here. So one example that a lot of students talk about is that they believe that their degree, what they study, should directly lead to their career path. So if I'm doing a bachelor of business, I have to work in business. If I'm doing accounting, I have to do accounting. It doesn't necessarily mean that, but that's the assumption that they have. So rather than thinking, I need to find a job that's related to my major or my degree, they can reframe that and say, I can find jobs that can use my education, my skills, and my experiences. Another example here is where we think of indecision as open-mindedness. So rather than thinking, gosh, I don't know what to do, I'm really unclear what I should be doing, sometimes we should see that as, in a positive way, we should be more open-minded rather than seeing indecision as something quite negative. So I had a student who studied international studies in the university. They didn't know what they wanted to do with their degree. They were obviously indecisive, but they really liked to work in they liked fashion. That was one of their interests. So they reframed their problem by saying, how can I use my skills from my international studies degree to work in fashion? And in Australia, I'm not sure if this is like in Greece, and I'll talk to you about that later. We talk to students about, they're called job clusters. So basically, skill clusters, sorry. There's examples of many different jobs that are part of one skill cluster. So if you're working in, for example, human resources, in recruitment, you can move across to another role. It's in policy development. So they use very similar skills. You don't need to go back to university to do another degree. If you get some experience, you can transfer your knowledge from one area to another. Obviously, some degrees you can't do that. Teaching degree, becoming a doctor, become a lawyer, you need to retrain. You need to go back to university. But there are a lot of jobs in Australia where you don't need to go back to university to retrain. You need to have the experiences and the skills to transfer knowledge across. Another reframing is a negative event. So a negative unplanned event, example, COVID, pandemics, an opportunity for learning. A lot of people lost jobs during the COVID pandemic. A lot of people saw opportunities during the pandemic. And there was one example I read in the paper of a person who worked in a cafe in hospitality industry. She was working at a restaurant. She lost her job, and she took advantage of the Australian government had some free courses for people to do. And she did a course on website and coding. And she actually wanted to create a website for Spanish speakers. She was from South America, and she wanted to create a website for Spanish speakers moving or visiting Australia. And she created this website, and through this website, she actually received money through advertisers, people advertising on her website. It was a very nicely done website. And she said in the article, COVID gave me the opportunity to refocus on where I want to go and what I want to do. So I'm really grateful for that. So that's another positive experience. Another example of reframing is how you could reframe your circumstances, or how you bring value and meaning to your role. So you think of someone who drives a bus, for example. I read recently about someone who drives buses for children in their school. And this person, rather than seeing his job as just a bus driver, he actually built a community and became a role model for the children. He would get to know all the children. He'd understand the children. He knew what the students' strengths were. He would give them roles in the bus. So you'd be the administrator. You're the leader. And he'd get them to have tasks while he was driving the bus, and they were in the bus with him. And they got to know the driver. They got to love the driver. They really thought that he loved the kids. He was a really positive role model for them. And that's another quote he mentioned in that article. I put time, effort, love, and care, understanding each and every one of those kids. So he kind of recrafted the job he was in. It wasn't just a driving job for him. It was more than that. There was a lot of meaning and value for him. And that's another way of reframing your circumstances. And that's him there. I'm going to play a short video for you. This is John Kromboltz, who I mentioned before. He's a psychologist who, one of the theories was planned happenstance theory that he worked on. But I'm going to play a video. It's about 2-3 minutes long. And I want you to listen to about a client he had. Good.
Frida, you need to share the sound as well when you press share screen. And you need to also mark the box down bottom left corner, share sound. So you need to share the sound as well. So press share screen again. Select the PowerPoint, and on the bottom left corner there is you need to tick a box called share sound.
Δεν το πάτησα αυτό. Δεν το πάτησα έτσι. Πες το πάλι, συγγνώμη, πάλι.
Share screen, green button.
Ναι.
Bottom left corner, share sound.
Okay. I might do it differently, Dimitri.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to do it the old school way and find it on YouTube. Only because,
okay.
Yeah, I just feel a bit.
The skills and personality.
Γιατί παίζει αυτό?
Skills and personality required. Now we know.
Αφού το σταμάτησα, γιατί παίζει πάλι?
Όχι, θα το βάλω εγώ μισό λεπτό.
Θα το βάλεις τι?
No. One moment. Let's go. Share sound, share.
who's
Right.
the Wizard of Oz.
Είναι από Δημήτρη,
Who should
από 1 λεπτό 20 μέχρι 4 λεπτά και 5 δευτερόλεπτα.
Οκ, 1 λεπτό 20.
Well, you know, I was helping a guy recently who hated his job, and I said, why? You know, and you know, I'll give you the short version of the story. And he said, well, I'm a refrigerator salesman and I just hate my job. And I said, well, what part of the job do you hate? And he said, I don't know, I just hate the whole thing. Well, isn't there any way we could find out? See? He said, well, I suppose I could kind of keep a record of what I do that I like a little bit and what I hate the most and so on. I said, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. Why don't you do that? And why don't you know, you could, instead of just saying you hate it or you love it, you could say, you could have a 10-point rating scale. Oh yeah, he says, that would be good. And I could make some comments about each thing that I do. And I said, would you be willing to try that for one day? And he said, oh yeah, sure, I'll try it for a day. But I didn't see him for 2 weeks. He came back in 2 weeks. He had kept a 2-week record of everything he had done. And it turned out that there were quite a few things he had done. I looked down the list of things. There were quite a few 10s and 9s and 8s, that things that he liked. He said he hated the job, but there were a whole bunch of things in there that he liked. And there was nothing below a 4. And,
oh, really?
Yep. And so I said, I'm really puzzled by this. How come? He says, you know, it turns out that it's not that I hate the job that I do. It's not the tasks. I just hate telling people that I'm a refrigerator salesman. That's what I hate. And so I said, well, you know, you could give yourself another title. He says, oh, yeah? Like what title? I said, well, I don't know. I don't have the slightest idea. But why don't you take the kind of things that you like? Well, let's take a look at your chart. What kinds of things did you give 10s to? He says, well, it's the kinds of things where I'm helping people decide what kind of refrigeration equipment to get at the least possible cost. I love helping people that way. Oh, well, I said, why don't you give yourself a title that sort of captures some of what you like? He said, well, I don't know what it'd be. And so he goes away and he comes back next week. And he gives me his business card.
What does
The
it
business
say?
card says, James, what's his name? Cold storage consultant. And that was, but I said, why is it that this title you like and the other title you hated? And then he gives me this whole thing about his personal upbringing and how his mother thought he was going to be the leader of the free world. And for him to become a refrigerator salesman, you see, was not good enough.
So I'm going to have to cut you off.
Oh, yeah, okay.
We've got your other role in ready, you know, your little
Fantastic.
video clip of you. So what are we seeing in this one?
Well, I forgot.
Αυτό ήτανε. Ωραία. Να ξανακάνω share εγώ.
Ναι.
Okay.
Είναι όντως μια πολύ καλή τακτική μέχρι να κάνεις το share, ότι να αναπλαισιώσουμε τον τρόπο με τον οποίο υποδηλώνουμε τη δουλειά μας και το νόημα το οποίο αποδίδουμε σε αυτή.
Ναι,
Πάρα πολύ ωραίο.
ναι, πολύ μου αρέσει αυτό το βίντεο, γιατί μας λέει πολλά πράγματα και όπως λέω εδώ πέρα, λίγο. Βλέπουμε ότι he hated his job as a salesperson, and he reflected on the job, and that's what I ask students to do too. I ask them to reflect on their daily activities, because sometimes they'll hate a job. They might work at the local cafe, but there'll be aspects of their job they might like, and we focus on the aspects, the positive aspects, to see what else we can do with those tasks. What else can we do? What other possibilities are there? So you can see here that he reframed, an example of a reframe is a title. So he liked helping people, and the cold storage consultant reflected that part of his job, the fact that he liked being able to help people. And it made him feel more important as well. As his mother wanted him to become the president of the United States. He couldn't get to that, but this was important to him. And I asked students, think of a negative event that presented itself as an opportunity, because whether they were open-minded or flexible or persistent, or reframe their experience. So it's a good icebreaker to speak about with students. The exploring part of this is an interesting one. This is where we have students try to become more practical. So they've worked on some of these self-awareness activities. They've learned at what they want to focus on, and prototyping, Greek word, prototypia, finding out, working on things that doesn't require time and effort, so they get an answer quickly, or as quickly as they can. So trying out ideas by having a bias to action, being drastirios, periodos, and having those critical thinking skills. And two ways of doing that are having conversations with people, talking to people, and having experiences. What do I want to find out? What questions do I need to ask them? What experiences can I get to have these questions answered before I make a decision? And I had a student once in a consultation, and he was an engineering student, and he said, what jobs can I find? I don't like maths, and I am an engineering student. What jobs can I do as an engineer where they don't use complex maths, or there's not only not using it, but use it to a lesser degree. So their job isn't mainly about calculations, it's other things. And this is where I wouldn't have the answer to that question. They need to go out and find out about that. So they need to go and talk to engineers. Experiences for students. This is some examples we ask students to look at. They might do some volunteering, for example. We have a mentoring program at our university where students find out who they can find, professionals who they can connect with and have a meeting with. We also have in Australia, it's a work integrated learning, which means that when students are studying for a degree, they have certain experiences within degree, practical experience, praktiki, informational interviews, similar to the mentoring program, but more of a short-term version where we find people to connect on LinkedIn, for example, and having a conversation with them. There's a website, I'm not sure if it's an Australian website, Forage, they're virtual internships. So basically companies like PwC, Deloitte, they will have problems, they advertise, and students apply and work on those problems. So it's I suppose a free way. It's free for the employer. They get a good deal because they get to see the students working on these problems. And if they find a student that's good, they might invite them for an interview. And this is another way for a student to find out how they can work for a company like Deloitte or PwC. We also have the RMIT Activator program. That's basically entrepreneurship training. So if students have a business idea, they can get mentored by others, people who have businesses, to help them develop their idea. And another way that students can, I suppose, prototype or find out about jobs or different courses is for them to do free courses online. So there's massive open online courses. Stanford University has them. So many different universities, really well-known universities, offer free courses. And that's a cheap way to find out whether you might want to do this degree without obviously paying for it, whether you like engineering, whether you like data science, for example. And this is another example that an example that I was part of. I was with some other teachers, educators, and we did a course at Stanford University on designing your life. And one of them was this sort of prototyping. So we had to think about something that we'd like to do in the future. And we phrased a question. So this person, Sue Ann, said, how might I prototype running a non-profit community organization? So it would be expensive if this person went out and started running for creating a non-profit company. So we were trying to help this person find examples of what they could do to have an understanding of what it's like to run an organization without actually doing it in reality. So what kind of things that she could do is she could speak to the founders of companies. She could create a podcast about a journey that she might have in terms of organizing a non-profit community organization. You could look at the UN and the links of what support resources they might have in terms of opening a non-profit community organization. So this is something that we also ask our students. We ask our students to create an idea. How can I become a better presenter? How can I become a historian or anthropologist? And then the other students work together to help them with the different ideas, any suggestions they could have. Some of them might be realistic, some of them can be unrealistic. It's basically generating different ideas. And one or two might be more relevant to the person, some might not be relevant. And then the student takes action. What can they do to get a better understanding of the area they want to get into, the job they want to get into? You don't have to look at this in detail. It's basically a map. Again, a student wanted to put some ideas of what she could do with her international studies degree and her interest in fashion. And there were some different possibilities that she could look into. And this student here, this is a huge map. Basically, it's in a small version. This person studying osteopathy, and a degree like that, it doesn't have much creativity, and she was interested in creativity, so she wanted to find out how she can use osteopathy in looking for work in other areas where she could use her creativity. So she did some brainstorming there, and that's what we do in classes together. And I want to finish with this poem, which I love. It's a poem, Ithaki by Cavafy. You probably know it. You probably know it in Greek. I tried reading the Greek version, but I've got the English one here. And if you read this in your own time, basically thinking about the process of career rather than the journey, the process rather than the destination. Because in that process of looking into career, we look at things we learn about ourselves, things we learn about other people as well, things we understand what our values are, and they're really important in before you get to the end goal. So it's a beautiful analogy for career and life journey. These are some of the references. Here I've got some of the journal articles from the planned happenstance theory. Planned happenstance theory, one of them, it has been applied to people who've lost jobs, so involuntary career transitions. They're used in the theory has been used in different contexts for different people. So it's very useful would be useful to your clients. If anyone wants any resources, let me know as a journal article. I can get the journal article for you. And I had a few questions, and I know you probably have some questions, but I had some questions as well to the audience. So thank you for listening to this presentation.
Πρώτα πάμε στις ερωτήσεις του κοινού. Μπορεί να γίνουν και στα ελληνικά και θα προσπαθήσει η Φρέντα να απαντήσει όσο καλύτερα μπορεί στα ελληνικά, αλλά και στα αγγλικά. Και μετά μπορούμε να απαντήσουμε και στις ερωτήσεις που μας έχει η Φρέντα. Ελεύθερα, ανοίγετε και το μικρόφωνο, σηκώνετε το χέρι, γράφετε στο chat.
Αν θέλετε να πείτε τίποτα προσωπικά, μπορείτε να κάνετε και email σε εμένα. Άλλη ερώτηση.
Με ρωτάνε για το τεστ. Ναι, το link...
Ναι, το VIA. Δεν ξέρω ποιο λένε. Ναι.
Θα το συμπεριλάβω εγώ στο email που θα του στείλω.
Okay,
θα το βρω online να το αποστείλω. Απλά είναι μόνο στην αγγλική version, δεν έχει ελληνική. Το VIA.
Δεν έχει, δεν νομίζω. Ναι. Είναι σε άλλες γλώσσες νομίζω, αλλά όχι ελληνική.
Είναι ελληνική, θα και εγώ δεν έχει.
Καλημέρα, να ρωτήσω εγώ κάτι. Εγώ έγραψα στο chat για αν μπορούμε να έχουμε το τεστ και αν
Ναι,
μπορούμε να έχουμε τις κάποιες οδηγίες, πώς το χορηγούμε, κάτω από ποιες συνθήκες, τα ψυχομετρικά του χαρακτηριστικά, κάποιες τέτοιες πληροφορίες για το τεστ και πώς, ας πούμε, ερμηνεύεται το τεστ. Απλά βοηθάμε τα παιδιά να δουν τα θετικά του στοιχεία. Θα ήθελα λίγο να δω το συγκεκριμένο τεστ. Αυτό θέλω να... Που έχει σταθμιστεί, σε τι πληθυσμό.
ναι, υπάρχει ένα τεστ ειδικά για παιδιά και ένα ειδικά για μεγάλους. Δεν
Σε αυτό
ξέρω
μπορούμε να έχουμε πρόσβαση, πρέπει κάποιος να το αγοράσει. Πώς γίνεται?
Όχι, όχι, είναι δωρεάν. Μόνο πρέπει να... You have to register.
Ωραία.
Κάνεις εγγραφή.
Εννοείται, αλλά δεν πληρώνεις τίποτα. Το έχω κάνει εγώ πολλές φορές και δεν πλήρωσα.
Και μπορούμε να βγάλουμε, ας πούμε, βγάζει τα αποτελέσματα και ερμηνεύει. Πάρα πολύ ωραία. Και τα ψυχομετρικά του χαρακτηριστικά υπάρχουν σε αυτό το site που θα μας στείλετε ή τα έχετε δει εσείς, είναι αξιόπιστο?
Εννοείς στα αγγλικά reliable, εννοείς
Reliable, yeah.
Ναι.
very, very. It's a very well, it's a very rigorous tool, very well known. Done, a lot of studies have been done on it. Πολύ καλό είναι.
Ωραία, γιατί θέλω να το χρησιμοποιήσω και εγώ στους μαθητές μου, γι' αυτό.
Ναι,
Ευχαριστώ
ωραία,
πολύ.
ναι, τίποτα.
Έστειλα εγώ το σύνδεσμο. Γενικά στα τεστ και προσωπικότητας και strengths, μιλάμε τώρα για τεστ δυνατοτήτων. Τι πιστεύει το άτομο ότι έχει σαν δυνατότητα. Υπάρχουν και στα ελληνικά κάποια μεταφρασμένα, όπως το 16 προσωπικότητες του Κατέλ, που έχει ελληνική έκδοση κιόλας. Να τη συμπεριλάβω και αυτή τώρα στις ομιλίες και στις σημειώσεις. Είναι όντως κάτι πολύ ωραίο. Το μόνο θέμα που έχουμε στα ελληνικά είναι τα τεστ ενδιαφερόντων, δεν έχουμε πολλά. Πλέον αρχίζουν και κυκλοφορούν κάποια, τα έχετε δει, του κύριου Δρόσου του Αριάδνη, το Advisor της Employ, τη Aison Psychometric έχει ένα άλλο, το Ariston. Αρχίζουν και εμφανίζονται και εκείνη που ήταν το πιο πολύ το μεγάλο θέμα, στα τεστ ενδιαφερόντων. Στα τεστ δυνάμεων και skills υπάρχουν έτσι παγκόσμια αποδεκτά, όπως και το VIA και το 16 Personalities και ένα άλλο είχα δει πάλι με Strengths, το American Institute of Career Guidance, το οποίο ήταν στα αγγλικά, αλλά και πάλι και αυτό πολύ ευρέως διαδεδομένο. Και το χρησιμοποιώ και εγώ με ενήλικες, τώρα έχω κολλήσει, τώρα θυμάμαι το link.
Ωραία.
Κάποια άλλη ερώτηση από το κοινό? Να πάμε και σε ερωτήσεις που έχει η Φρίντα, γιατί είναι ωραία συζήτηση, να ανταλλάξουμε και λίγο εργαλεία. Στην προηγούμενη διαφάνεια θυμάμαι που ήταν. Θα μεταφράσω εγώ τι εργαλεία χρησιμοποιείτε για να βοηθήσετε τους πελάτες να μάθουν για τον εαυτό τους, για την αυτογνωσία τους. Ποιες ασκήσεις, ας πούμε, αφηγηματικές ή κάποιο εργαλείο ερωτηματολόγιο. Είναι ωραίο έτσι να ακούσουμε διάφορες απόψεις και στο chat να μου γράψετε και να ανοίξετε το μικρόφωνο.
Καλημέρα, τι κάνεις, πώς είσαι?
Καλημέρα.
Καλημέρα.
Γράφω κι εγώ μερικές στο chat που χρησιμοποιώ. Γράψτε και εσείς οι υπόλοιποι ελεύθερα, έτσι να δούμε λίγο τι εργαλεία και ανταλλάξουμε και μερικές ιδέες.
Ερώτηση για το θαύμα. Τι είναι αυτό, Δημήτρη?
The question about the miracle, when you ask the clients that something changed and you feel this and describe what changed.
Ναι. Ωραία.
Επίσης, μια καλή ποιοτική άσκηση είναι η SWOT ανάλυσης, όπου γράφει τα θετικά, τα αρνητικά, τις ευκαιρίες και τα εμπόδια που μπορεί κάποιος να έχει και μπορεί να τα συνδυάσει ώστε να ξεπεράσει κάποιο εμπόδιο, να δει τα θετικά του χαρακτηριστικά για να μπορέσει να καλύψει αυτά τα εμπόδια που ανακύπτουν στην καριέρα του, κάτι που είναι πλέον αναγκαίο στις μέρες μας λόγω της μη γραμμικότητας της σταδιοδρομίας Και πώς μπορούμε έτσι να ξεπεράσουμε όλα αυτά τα εμπόδια, όπως είναι ο COVID, η οικονομική κρίση, η μακροχρόνια ανεργία, θέματα που μαστίζουν γενικότερα την παγκόσμια, αλλά και την ελληνική πραγματικότητα.
Πολύ σημαντικό, και το SWOT Analysis είναι μια εκδοχή που έχουμε δανειστεί από το χώρο των επιχειρήσεων και του business και την κάνουμε και
Θα
σε
μπορούσα να
προσωπικό
προτείνω
επίπεδο.
κι εγώ κάτι.
Παρακαλώ.
Βέβαια, αυτά που είπε η συναδέλφισσα, αφορούν νομίζω φοιτητές, δηλαδή ενήλικες. Επειδή κάποιοι ασχολούμαστε κυρίως με μαθητές, ξέρω εγώ από 15 χρονών, και επειδή σε αυτές τις ηλικίες το παιχνίδι παίζει πάρα πολύ σημαντικό ρόλο, εμείς με μία συνάδελφο από το Ευρωπαϊκό Πανεπιστήμιο, υπό την αιγίδα της κυρίας Αργυροπούλου, είχαμε κάνει ένα παιχνίδι, το Career Adventure Game, την πρώτη πίστα τουλάχιστον, η οποία συνδύαζε το παιχνίδι, τη μάθηση, την ηθάκη του Καβάφη, και γενικά ήταν ένα ταξίδι που στην ουσία πήραμε του Πάουλο Κοέλιο το βιβλίο, το ανακατέψαμε με λίγο Καβάφη, ηθάκη και φτιάξαμε την σταδιοδρομία σαν την πορεία του αλχημιστή. Και βάλαμε μέσα πολλές έννοιες που βοηθάει πάρα πολύ τα παιδιά, γιατί προς το παρόν είναι επιτραπέζιο, αλλά ενεργοποιεί πράγματα που δεν τα είχαν σκεφτεί. Δηλαδή, θα ήθελα να προτείνω όχι αυτό, γιατί αυτό δεν υπάρχει. Αυτό ήταν μόνο σε επίπεδο ακαδημαϊκό, αλλά να εντάξουν λίγο και το παιχνίδι μέσα, σαν εργαλείο.
Τι ωραίο που είναι αυτό. Πολύ ωραία, Λένα. Πολύ ωραίο.
Είναι σημαντικό, βλέπετε λοιπόν την ειδίκευση που υπάρχει και στον κλάδο μας, είτε μαθητές λυκείου, είτε ενήλικες, είτε και αλλαγή καριέρας ή πιο εξειδικευμένο. Και όντως και το παιχνίδι, το να είναι διασκεδαστικό, το να είναι interactive, είναι πάρα πολύ σημαντικό, ειδικά στα ομαδικά εργαστήρια. Εγώ έχω να δείξω άλλο ένα, το Individual Development Plan, είναι του MIT. Είναι ένα πλαίσιο δεξιοτήτων για υποψήφιους διδάκτορες. Είναι αυτό το οποίο κάνω εγώ τώρα στο workshop υποψήφιων διδακτόρων για τον επαγγελματικό τους προσανατολισμό. Είναι δωρεάν, απλά με εγγραφή. Το χρησιμοποιεί ο χρήστης και έχει κάποια τεστ δεξιοτήτων, έχει κάποια self-assessments για τα career values της αξίες της σταδιοδρομίας. Και τώρα στο πρώτο workshop που γίνεται στη χώρα μας για τον επαγγελματικό προσανατολισμό υποψήφιων διδακτόρων από όλους τους τομείς, είναι κάτι που το βλέπω μαζί με τους ωφελούμενους. Σε πολύ πιο εξειδικευμένο κοινό αυτό. Αλλά βλέπουμε ότι με το να ψάχνουμε λίγο και στα αγγλικά και στην παγκόσμια βιογραφία τι υπάρχει, τους μπορούμε να βρούμε κρυμμένα διαμάντια. Ο καθένας στο δικό του target group. Πάμε και στη δεύτερη ερώτηση. Η ιδέα των μεταφερόμενων δεξιοτήτων, πώς την αντιλαμβάνονται οι πελάτες αλλά και οι εργοδότες? Το ότι οι δεξιότητες μεταφέρονται από ένα κλάδο σε έναν άλλο, πώς γίνεται αντιληπτό από τους πελάτες, τους ωφελούμενους, αλλά και από εργοδότες.
Καλημέρα και από μένα.
Καλημέρα.
Επειδή έρχομαι από τον κόσμο των επιχειρήσεων, είναι μια τάση τα τελευταία χρόνια να παίρνουμε ανθρώπους από ένα κλάδο και να μπολιάζουμε ουσιαστικά το technical know-how τους σε έναν άλλο κλάδο. Δεν είναι εύκολο, γιατί πρέπει να αντιλαμβάνεσαι τις ιδιαιτερότητες του κλάδου, όμως φέρνει φρέσκες ιδέες και λες, αφού το είδα κάπου αλλού, γιατί να μην μπορεί να δουλέψει εκεί? Έρχεσαι και αμφισβητείς πολλές φορές πώς γίνονται τα πράγματα. Οπότε με ένα μεν σκεπτικισμό, γιατί θέλει και κάποια εξειδίκευση σε κάποιες περιπτώσεις, κάποια industries είναι αρκετά εξειδικευμένα, είναι πολύ θετικό.
Εγώ επίσης βλέπω ότι σε πολλούς κλάδους, όπως και στο HR, άτομα με μη παραδοσιακό background, από ανθρωπιστικές σπουδές, από καθηγητικές σχολές πηγαίνουν προς τα εκεί. Ο δικός μας ο κλάδος είναι ένας τέτοιος κλάδος. Ο κλάδος της μεταφοράς τεχνολογίας πάλι ένας κλάδος που δέχεται κόσμο από διαφορετικά backgrounds. Είναι κάτι το οποίο αναπτύσσεται και στην Ελλάδα. Οι εργοδότες δηλαδή το έχουν πάρει χαμπάρι. Τώρα ο πελάτης συνήθως δεν το γνωρίζει ότι μπορεί να αλλάξει κλάδο και να πάει, ας πούμε, τώρα εγώ έχω το φυσικό, να πάει στο recruiting, να πάει στο HR ή σπουδάζοντας IT και στο CSD του Ηρακλείου, επειδή είναι ανθρωποκεντρικός άνθρωπος, να πάει στο project management και πάλι και στο human resources ή στο product manager. Και λέει, αν δεν το ξέρω ότι μπορώ να πάω προς τα εκεί, είναι κάτι που δεν το γνωρίζει όταν δεν έχουν εξερευνήσει τις επαγγελματικές προοπτικές.
Okay. Αλλά the employers που λες, the employers slowly are understanding or accepting.
Οι εργοδότες το γνωρίζουν πιο καλά από τους ωφελούμενους.
Ναι.
Και η τελευταία ερώτηση μου αρέσει πάρα πολύ. Η πληροφοριακή συνέντευξη, το να μιλάει κάποιος με έναν επαγγελματία για το πώς είναι μια μέρα στη δουλειά. Πόσο αποδεχόμενο είναι αυτό στην Ελλάδα?
Ξέρω ότι υπάρχει μια οργάνωση που λέγεται Tipping Point, που μιλάνε στα παιδιά, μιλάνε στο ίντερνετ, μέσω ίντερνετ σε σχολεία στην Ελλάδα, μιλάνε με διαφορετικούς επαγγελματίες, αλλά δεν ξέρω τι γίνεται με μεγάλους. Σαν παράδειγμα, κάποιος που τελείωσε το πανεπιστήμιο και θέλει να μιλήσει με κάποιον που είναι λογιστής ή κάποιος που δουλεύει σε χημείο. Είναι παράξενο να βρεις...
Υπάρχει οργανωμένα ακόμα αυτό. Θα ήταν ωραίο ίσως στα γραφεία διασύνδεσης να κάνετε τέτοιες...
Υπάρχει το jobpair.gr, το οποίο το έχει ο κύριος, πάντα μπερδεύω, είναι Ιωάννου ή Νικολάου, από το ΟΠΟ, καθηγητής του HR. Θυμάμαι τώρα, πάντα μπερδεύω το επώνυμό του, ενώ τον θαυμάζω σαν άνθρωπο, παράξενο. Ναι, έχει τη ΜΚΟ, η οποία τι κάνει? Για έναν τελειόφοιτο ή έναν πρόσφατο απόφοιτο, του δίνει δυνατότητα 4 δωρεάν mentoring συναντήσεις με κάποιον εργαζόμενο. Ο εργαζόμενος αυτός έχει συμφωνήσει η εταιρεία του ότι αυτές τις συναντήσεις θα γίνουν μέσα στην εταιρεία, άμα είναι από Αθήνα Θεσσαλονίκη διαζώσεις, ή θα γίνουν εξ αποστάσεως, αλλά πάλι μέσα στα πλαίσια του ωραρίου του. Δεν το κάνει από τον ελεύθερο του χρόνο, δηλαδή, ο μέντορας. Είναι κάτι που το προσφέρει η εταιρεία σαν benefit. Πάει πάρα πολύ καλά λοιπόν το Job Pair. Είναι το link με το οποίο φεύγουν τα παιδιά από τη συμβουλευτική σαν επόμενο βήμα, ότι θα μιλήσεις όπως και δίποτε με έναν εργαζόμενο.
Να μοιραστώ λίγο τη δική μου εμπειρία. Πρόσφατα, την περασμένη εβδομάδα, έλαβα ένα μήνυμα στο LinkedIn από μια κοπέλα την οποία δεν γνωρίζω και μου λέει: θα ήθελα να μιλήσουμε αν μπορείτε. Προσπαθώ να αλλάξω, να πάω προς τα εκεί, να κάνω αυτά. Θα ήθελα λίγο τη συμβουλή σας, να το συζητήσουμε. Δεν την ξέρω την κοπέλα, εντελώς άγνωστη, δεν έχουμε κανέναν κοινό γνωστό, τίποτα.
Όμως, σας βρήκε στο LinkedIn επειδή έχετε βάλει το Career Counselor ή επειδή είναι στο...
Δεν το έχω βάλει, γιατί δεν το κάνω δεν είναι το πρώτο. Αυτή τη στιγμή δεν είναι κάτι που το διαφημίζω ότι το κάνω. Οπότε θεωρώ ότι δεν το έκανε. Προσπαθεί και αυτή ίσως στον κλάδο αυτό και θέλει να δει πώς, τι γίνεται κτλ. Μου κάνει πολύ εντύπωση, οφείλω να πω. Θετική.
Ναι. Όχι, εγώ έχω δεχτεί δεκάδες τέτοια μηνύματα για άτομα που θέλουν να μπουν στον κλάδο. Γι' αυτό είχαμε κάνει και το βίντεο με τον κύριο Δρόσο για το μεταπτυχιακό και τις προοπτικές. Δηλαδή υπάρχει και το mentoring στην Ελλάδα. Απλά αυτό πρέπει να γίνεται λίγο... Δεν είναι όπως στην Αμερική και στην Αυστραλία που είναι σε φάση Φρίντα, να κάνουμε ένα μισάωρο meeting, να μου πεις λίγο πώς είναι η δουλειά κλπ. Στο εξωτερικό είναι νόρμα. Είναι πολύ ανοιχτή σε αυτό. Στην Ελλάδα είμαστε ακόμα λίγο καχύποπτοι όταν έχετε ένα τέτοιο μήνυμα και δεν δορίζουν όλοι έτσι εύκολα τον χρόνο τους στην πληροφορική συνέντευξη. Γι' αυτό είναι πιο εύκολο να γίνει θεσμοθετημένα. Ένας άλλος σύλλογος είναι το Women on Top, γυναικεία ΜΚΟ, όπου έχει πακέτα mentoring. Εκεί το mentoring δυστυχώς δεν είναι δωρεάν, γιατί τα λεφτά πάνε για να συντηρήσουν τη ΜΚΟ. Ξεκινάει, αν θυμάμαι καλά, από 62 ευρώ το τρίμηνο και έχει γυναίκες μέντορες, οι οποίες βοηθάνε άλλες γυναίκες να ανέβουν στην πυραμίδα των επιχειρήσεων. Because we need more women on top. That's the slogan. Και όντως είμαστε πολύ χάλια στα ποσοστά στις γυναίκες που είναι σε ηγετικές θέσεις στην Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση σαν Ελλάδα. Οπότε και αυτούς τους στηρίζουμε πάρα πολύ.
Τώρα που το είπες αυτό, Δημήτρη, υπάρχει και η Women Do Business, η κριτική.
Ναι, το ξέρω. Σήμερα στο Ηράκλειο είναι οι φίλοι.
Πρόγραμμα.
Τους έχουμε εδώ στο Ηράκλειο, είναι πολύ καλοί φίλοι.
Ναι, είναι εξαιρετικές.
Μπορείτε να δείτε και μια πλατφόρμα που έβαλα στο chat.
Του HMU, του ΕΛΜΕΠΑ, ναι.
το ΕΛΜΕΠΑ που μου φάνηκε πάρα πολύ ενδιαφέρουσα πρόσφατα, έτσι, που τη χρησιμοποίησαμε τέλος πάντων σε μια εργασία για το μεταπτυχιακό που κάνουμε με την ΕΦΗ, που είμαστε τώρα εδώ στο μεταπτυχιακό του ΕΚΠΑ, που είναι υπό την αιγίδα και της περιφέρειας Κρήτης. Στα πλαίσια ενός διδακτορικού εκπονήθηκε αυτή η πρόταση, τέλος πάντων, και συνδέει μέντορες μέσω τεχνητής νοημοσύνης με φοιτητές και άτομα, τέλος πάντων, ευάλωτων ομάδων, και μάλιστα λειτουργεί δωρεάν και δίνοντας πολύ χρόνο, τέλος πάντων, ο μέντορας στον ωφελούμενο και αυτά, και μου φάνηκε ιδιαίτερα ενδιαφέρουσα για τα ελληνικά δεδομένα, που δεν είχα ξανακούσει κάτι έτσι τέτοιο.
Βλέπουμε λοιπόν ότι αναδύονται πλατφόρμες, οι οποίες, το καλό αυτών των πλατφορμών, ειδικά του Jobber, εγώ θα πω ότι δεν χρειάζεται ο μέντορας από τον προσωπικό του χρόνο, το απόγευμα δηλαδή που είναι στο σπίτι του και πίνει το καφεδάκι του, κάνει τις δουλειές του, να αφιερώσει χρόνο για το mentoring. Το κάνει μέσα στα πλαίσια της δουλειάς, μέσα στο 8ωρο, και είναι πιο εύκολο λοιπόν να το διαχειριστεί και ο ίδιος και να είναι πιο ανοιχτός στο να το κάνει αυτό.
Και το job shadowing επίσης, που εδώ πάλι στην Ελλάδα δεν είναι θεσμοθετημένο, γιατί, ας πούμε, έχει μια πολύ ενδιαφέρουσα επιχείρηση κάποιος γνωστός μου, και του έλεγα ως ιδέα, τέλος πάντων, να γίνει κάποιο project με μαθητές ή φοιτητές, και μου λέει, εμένα μου αρέσει πάρα πολύ αυτό, γιατί είναι με ρομποτική και φτιάχνει ρομποτικά μηχανήματα για εργοστάσια, μεγάλα εργοστάσια και μικρά, και μου λέει, εγώ πολύ θα το ήθελα. Εσύ μπορείς να μου βρεις. Δεν υπάρχει θεσμικό πλαίσιο να γίνει. Εγώ θα ήθελα να συμμετέχω σε κάτι τέτοιο, ας πούμε.
Δεν υπάρχει ο νόμος που να το υποστηρίξει, και δεν υπάρχει όπως και αυτό το να δουλεύω κάπου εθελοντικά χωρίς να πληρώνομαι. Πάλι δεν υπάρχει νομοθετικά, αυτό για διαφόρους λόγους. Για να πάει κάποιος για job shadowing και να μην, όταν σκάσει έλεγχος, παραδείγματος χάρη από την εφορία, έχεις εργαζόμενο το οποίο δεν τον πληρώνεις και ανασφάλιστο και πάρε πρόστιμο στην εταιρεία.
Ή αλλιώς να γίνει και κάποιο ατύχημα, έτσι, γιατί π.χ. του γνωστού μου την εταιρεία είναι και μηχανήματα εκεί, ιστορίες,
μηχανήματα, μπορεί να γίνει πολλά.
Πιθανή κίνδυνη, ας πούμε.
Πάρα πολύ ωραίο λοιπόν όλα αυτά που είδαμε. Να σας ευχαριστήσω όλους που ήρθατε σήμερα εδώ. Πριν σας αποχαιρετήσω, γιατί θα το δείξω να φανεί και στο webinar, θα το δουν οι υπόλοιποι, ότι κάνουμε μαζί με άλλους συναδέλφους μια εκστρατεία, γίνεται για να φτιάξουμε σωματείο συμβούλων σταδιοδρομίας. Έχουμε τελειώσει με τις υπογραφές και σιγά σιγά θα ξεκινήσουμε να ενημερώνουμε και να μαζεύουμε τα μέλη. Οπότε τώρα θα σας βάλω ένα QR code που μπορείτε να γραφτείτε απλά άτυπα, όταν με το καλό βγει να σας στείλω ένα email ότι μπείτε να γραφτείτε στο σωματείο. Το βάζω λοιπόν εδώ. Μπορείτε και τώρα να το σκανάρετε με το κινητό σας και θα στείλω και το σύνδεσμο, αν κάποιος είναι από κινητό, να μπει να γραφτεί. Είναι για να μπορέσουμε να κυνηγάμε τα επαγγελματικά μας δικαιώματα και στις προκηρύξεις του δημοσίου, αλλά και για να είναι πιστοποιημένο το επάγγελμα. Και θα γίνονται και με το καλό κάποιες δράσεις, κάποια συνέδρια, κάποια webinars, όπως και αυτό που κάνω εγώ τώρα, λίγο πιο άτυπα. Θα γίνονται και πιο οργανωμένα από το σωματείο. Σας αφήνω έτσι 2 λεπτά να το σκανάρετε να γραφτείτε. Και πριν σας αποχαιρετήσω, να ενημερώσω ότι το επόμενο webinar θα γίνει 17 Δεκεμβρίου, ημέρα πάλι Κυριακή, με την Χριστίνα Τιγαρίδη, που είναι από το Ηνωμένο Βασίλειο, Ελληνίδα career coach και σύμβουλος σταδιοδρομίας, όπου θα είναι και αυτό έτσι κάτι ενδιαφέρον πάλι, να σμίξουμε με ένα άτομο Έλληνας του εξωτερικού να μας πει την τεχνογνωσία που εφαρμόζεται εκεί. Να ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ τη φίλη μου την Φρίντα ή Φρόσο, όπως την αποκαλούμε εδώ στην Ελλάδα.
Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ, Δημήτρη, και ευχαριστώ σε εσάς που ήρθατε να με ακούσετε, να μιλήσω. Καλό μεσημέρι να έχετε.
Μεγάλη μου χαρά και έχω μια όμορφη Κυριακή σε όλους και σε όσους μας βλέπετε από το YouTube. Μπαίνετε συντονισμένοι, θα έρθουν και άλλα webinar και άλλες ωραίες δράσεις και με το καλό να γίνει και το σωματείο και να σμίξουμε και από κοντά.
Γεια σας.
Ευχαριστούμε πολύ.
Ευχαριστούμε πολύ. Καλό Σαββατοκύριακο.
Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ σε όλους.